Hi, everyone. It's Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. This week's Rutgers Rant is brought to you by the New Brunswick Development Corporation. A big thank you to our sponsor and to all of our listeners for the continued support. Now let's get to the show.
From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politi and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lanny. Let's start shopping.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Rant. Politi here, Fonseca, Lanny. We're all here. Fellas, I'm going to start right off with some very, very good news. The New Brunswick Development Corporation, DevCo, our friends at DevCo have re-upped their contract for another year to sponsor this thing. Couldn't be happier about that. Chris Palladino is a great friend of Rutgers. They do great stuff down there. And this is really exciting. I get to go into a studio and record like professional advertisements for DevCo now. So maybe they give me like a hard hat and I can do like one of those videos like they do with Aaron Lewis when I'm walking around like inspecting a building down there or something. That'd be fun, right?
You might have to put a name tag over your head so they don't confuse you and Aaron Lewis because you guys look alike.
We do look alike. Yeah, we have that. We have similar body frames. Absolutely. Yeah.
How many sacks are you getting this season, please?
Well, at least 10 and a half.
And more importantly, how many quarterback hits?
Yeah. There's got to be somebody there though. Someone down there and right now is listening to this. Be like, they could have spent that money that they're giving those guys on like a strong safety, like a backup punter or something, and they're giving it to them. But no, we're very happy, Palladino. Thank you to DevCo. We'll have more news on that soon. So appreciate that. We're a part of the DevCo team. Me, Lanny, Wimsatt, Cliff. Who else?
Aaron Lewis.
Yeah.
Sam Brown.
Is that it? Sam Brown is in DevCo
is he?
team? I think so. There you go.
And if he's not, good. You should be.
You should be. Absolutely. You would think he is.
Imagine him running construction material from one side of the site to the other.
That's a good video idea. See, you could be like DevCo's, you could be like their creative consultant. That's a good idea. Client carrying some 2x4s across the yard for construction. That's good. I like it.
I live in a DevCo building in New Brunswick and don't even know it, Brian.
It's very possible. I would not be shocked, to be honest.
It's a good point. It's a good point. They have built everything down there. All right, let's get started. We're going to talk a lot of basketball. We're going to talk a lot of other off the field stuff, but we have to start with football. We're now 3.5 weeks away from the big Northwestern game, I believe, if my calendar is correct. You guys were at the scrimmage on Saturday. Looks like you gleaned quite a bit about what this team's looking like offensively. I guess most of the questions are about Gavin Wimsatt, of course. So, I mean, just give it to me, fellas. How's the quarterback looking his first scrimmage of the summer?
The positives that Greg brought up was that he did not turn the ball over, which, as anyone who watched Rutgers last year knows, that was a very big issue. No interceptions, no fumbles for the first or second team, which is what Greg said, which also means Evan Simon did not have any interceptions or fumbles either, which is a good sign for the offense. That means they will not, if they can keep doing this in a game setting, they will not blow games the way they did against Iowa and Nebraska. The more alarming thing is that Greg said that Wimsatt was inaccurate, was not very accurate, was less accurate than he had been in previous practices, which should send alarm bells because accuracy was Gavin's major issue last season. So you'd like to see him up those numbers, especially in a controlled scrimmage where he's not getting hit. Defensive players are encouraged not to go too aggressively at the quarterback. So I think if you want to look at it, half glass full, no interceptions, very good sign. Half glass empty, 1 touchdown and inaccuracy issues. It's not, there's reason to be pessimistic that way too.
That's a big honking red flag for me, Pat. I mean, that's the one thing he's got to improve. I mean,
a hunker.
That is a hunker.
Yeah.
Are they not putting him in an offense to minimize those?
I thought the offense actually looked a lot more simplified and was designed for success for Wimsatt. I think there were a lot of deep throws that he missed on. He threw I will say he did throw a couple of nice balls to Chris Long, and Chris Long looks like he's going to be that deep threat of the wide receiver core. But I think he missed on those intermediate, like 10 to 15 yards, which are critical. We shall see. But yeah, it was definitely alarming to see inaccuracy being his biggest issue once again. But I thought the offense was simplified to make those 3rd and 5 easier for him. And, third and short, if Rutgers can get to 3rd and short, he should be better in those situations. Mm-hmm. So I thought one of my biggest takeaways was I kind of liked what Shiraka had done with the offense. I thought it was a little bit It was simpler. The running game wasn't as effective as I thought it would be. Maybe there were a few issues why. The defense is obviously a little ahead of the offense in that regard. But I thought the offense was set up for Wimsatt to succeed, which is really what you want to see at this point.
Are we talking RPOs here? Are we talking what is that? Is this the Minnesota offense that we all expect?
It really was. It was a lot of RPO and a lot of like slants. I don't want to give away too much, but there were a couple screens thrown, Steve.
That was
a big topic last year. We couldn't get a screen.
USA. That is incredible. Yeah. Who are right now, if you were to rank the weapons that we think are going to catch passes in this offense? Is Johnny Langan number one? I mean, who you said Chris Long? Can you give me a sense for which of those guys are emerging from that really cluttered sort of collection of newcomers as far as receivers go?
The one name that keeps flying under the radar is Isaiah Washington. He's been pretty steady with the first team. Christian Dremel had a couple catches Saturday. And then you got the newcomers. Jacquay Jackson had a couple targets, a couple catches. But I still think Langan is in for a big year at tight end. I really do. That was one of my big takeaways.
All right, shifting to the offensive line. It looks like he's got the left side locked up, but the right side's still a battle. I mean, that unit's got to be better. You're bringing Pat Flaherty. You've got experience. You've got depth, I think, for the first time. Big Ten depth. I mean, Brian, what's your sense? Is that shaken out now that we're gonna see a better offensive line?
I don't know if depth is. I mean, you'll have depth in the sense you'll have bodies. I don't know about quality depth just yet. Greg did say that there was the battle on the right side, like you mentioned, Needham and Missouri at right tackle. And the right guard situation is interesting, right? Because Chifoni and Asamoah are going at it. I have a vague memory that they both played on the left side last year. I thought that was, at least that was what I thought, right?
You're right.
So that implies that Curtis Dunlap is on the left. I don't know if this is them mixing and matching in a scrimmage and testing things out. I don't know if this is adjustments from what they saw last year. I think there are a couple of certainties on this line. There's Ireland Brown at center with a decent backup in Gus Zelinkis, Colin Pierce at left tackle, and then that the guards will be those combination of those three in those spots: Chifoni, Asamoah, and Curtis Dunlap.
And we have settled one camp battle already. We have a kicker. That's exciting.
There is a kicker, and much to the chagrin of certain listeners and a certain media member who keeps busting my balls about bringing this up on the podcast. A very loyal listener of the podcast.
Loyal listener.
He'll be unnamed, but he knows.
Right. I think I've got a good guess. Go ahead. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. There is a kicking battle. There was a kicking battle. I was very intrigued by it, and apparently Jay Patel has done enough early on in camp and in the offseason to pass Jude McAdamy, who was the starting kicker last year and struggled in intermediate kicks. I believe he missed 3 kicks in the 30 to 39 yard range. Mm-hmm. Jay Patel is, I wouldn't say automatic, but he's pretty good in that short range, which I think is kind of helping him. He doesn't have the same leg as Jude, but I think consistency is pretty big, obviously. So I think you'd rather make most of your kicks 40 yards and in than, maybe hit more kicks from 50 yards and out. So is there a possibility of a 2-kicker system, a kind of Chris Leak, Tim Tebow version of the kicking game? I don't know. I certainly think that the skill sets are there to do that. But Jay Patel has won the first battle of training camp, which is, I think, the most intriguing and exciting one.
Okay, I'll tell Fuchs you said so. All right, all right. Let's go. Let's put on our amateur Shianoologist hat here for a minute. Got several comments from readers saying that he didn't look exactly tickled in the press conference after the scrimmage. Made a good joke about the resemblance between him and Isaiah Iden, which I see totally. I totally see that. Tell me about your sense. Was the coach unhappy, displeased? What do we read about how he's feeling about the team at this point?
I think he was so hot and cold. Like 1 minute he was joking, 1 minute he was scratching his head thinking about the offense. So if I'm going to put my best Shiano hat on, I'm going to say he thought they took a step back in the scrimmage from what he saw in practice offensively. He was saying that he thought Gavin and the offense had looked good in practices leading up to the scrimmage, but maybe regressed a little bit in the scrimmage. And I think that was a little upsetting for him. So I'll leave it at that.
Leave it at that. Okay. Well, he's middle of camp. I'm sure every head coach is worried about something, so we shouldn't read too much into it. But based on your descriptions, I can understand why he's a little worried. All right, give me some names here. Give me a couple of guys that you thought stood out in this scrimmage that would surprise people.
Greg Schiano said two young guys that had productive days. Ian Strong, who had a pretty good spring. So I think he's a young guy. Kirk Straka had named three young receivers that could play when he was on Big Ten Network that could have a role. Ian Strong, Davon Fuse, and Dylan Braithwaite. I think Ian Strong is pretty clearly ahead of that group, and I think he has a chance. Very impressive frame on a wide receiver. Big for a freshman. Him and Fama Toure are two of the bigger freshman wide receivers I've ever seen. So
that's interesting. That Strong has emerged more than Fama Toure, who came in with all the hype.
Well, Fama Toure came in late. He wasn't in the spring.
Right.
He came in the summer, so he's still kind of adapting. I can imagine the first 2-3 weeks of college practices. And another young guy that had a productive day was running back Ja'Shawn Benjamin. He might have trouble getting snaps in that very crowded running back room with a lot of guys there that could play, but I think he had a good day.
Crowded running back room. Never say that without thinking Ryan Dunleavy and Saquon Barkley. That's an inside joke for long-time Rutgers fans who understand that one. All right. Anything else we want to touch on with football before we go to basketball here? I mean, I'm sure we'll get to some questions on it in a minute, but was anything that stood out here?
I think anyone getting nervous about what they heard from Jerry DiNardo and the BTN crew last week, or what we're saying about the scrimmage, or what how Greg's demeanor is after the first scrimmage, it's probably a bit early to start, expecting a 2-10 year. I think there's a lot of training camp left, and I think the first real test is what happens when Northwestern comes out and how they look. Northwestern is a whole weird circus over there in Evanston. They got T-shirts defending their fired head coach, and then you got administrators talking about how it's a disgrace, and then you have a coach saying he's not going to infringe on anyone's freedom of speech like he's a politician. If they lose to Northwestern, I think that's panic button time. Which, by the way, a preview into a little gimmick. I was at Dave & Buster's this weekend, and I won a panic button, so I might be using this.
Oh, look at that! There you go. Punch that panic button.
I have it in front of me. I'm not going to hit it just yet, and I would expect. I would tell Rutgers fans not to hit it quite yet either.
Smash that panic button. Good stuff. All right, let's talk some hoops. We got the team overseas. They made the move from Senegal to your native land, Portugal. It looked like they played the Senegalese version of Athletes in Action, a pretty high-scoring game there. So what do we, other than allowing Cliff Omarori, who cannot do NIL deals over here because of his international student visa, has to, other than allowing him to slam, I mean, he is slamming in the ads over there for wings, for the yard, all sorts of stuff. It's hilarious to look at his social media. I mean, the man is working, the man is selling. You got to admire that. Other than that, what are we accomplishing over in overseas? I mean, have you seen anything from this team to give you some insight on where this direction is going roster wise?
We haven't seen much. They only released a highlight of the last two plays of their game against the Senegal Select, a game they won.
Select.
They won 85-83 by scoring 95 points based on the point totals we were given.
Wait a minute. So that just didn't add up? Is that? So
there was a non-shooting period, which my understanding was calculated in. There was a language barrier there. It was a long day. So it was not the most professional operation, but
gotcha. Okay.
Which is why it's hard to take away much from these games, right? Because I don't know the quality of the competition. I know the average age of the opponent is 28, but I can gather, 10 of my friends and go play basketball, and I'm sure the Rutgers basketball team would destroy us. I don't know if these guys are amateurs, former basketball players. I don't know. I don't know if there's much to take away from the fact they only won by 2, and they needed Andre Hyatt, who apparently turned into Michael Jordan and scored 30 points on like 70% shooting. They needed him to score a last-minute 3 to tie it, and they needed Antoine Woolfolk to get the putback to win. I don't know. I don't know what and then we were only given select stats. So some players had a full line. Andre Hyatt had 30 points on 9 of 15 shooting with 10 rebounds and X assists. And Derek Simpson had 9 assists. No shots, no rebounds, no steals, no nothing. Right. So it's really hard to glean. I think the bigger thing that the program is pushing is that more than what they're doing on the court, they're achieving a lot off the court.
Of course,
historical sites, spending time together, hiking. Apparently, they hiked for 6 hours in the African sun the day, the same day they play that game. I think those are the things that they're hoping to take away from, rather than, I think the score against the Senegal Select isn't going to be in the NCAA committee's, resume. So I think they're kind of flushing that game behind.
some great dance videos too. I mean, we're seeing some awkward dancing by on the beach, which is great. It's fun. This is what this is supposed to be. You're supposed to have a team bonding, the extra practices. They should come back way ahead of where they would have been without this. So it's great that they're doing it. And I think they're rewarding some really longtime boosters too with the trip. So I'd be very interested to hear when they get back what they accomplish. So they're going from here to Portugal. How many days over there? Same situation.
My understanding is they're going to come back Sunday, and they're splitting the rest of the time there between Algarve, which is in the south, the beach area, and then Lisbon in the last 3 days. They're supposed to play 2 games. I believe that's still the plan. I don't know the days. The schedule, I guess, is kind of mixed because my original understanding is they were supposed to play that game in Senegal on Friday and they played Thursday. So I'm not entirely sure when they'll play, but they're going to play 2 more games is what I understand.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, we'll touch base with them when they get back, but it looks like it's exactly what they wanted it to be so far. All right. Want to dive into some questions from the readers here? We've got a bunch of them, a bunch of good ones.
Let's do it.
You made fun of me. I've noticed that I was listening to you guys doing the pod solo, just in case. I'm sitting on a beach, beautiful beach in Fire Island, listening to you guys without me. And of course, you made fun of the fact that I ask you every time. I didn't realize I do this, that I ask you as if you can say, no, Steve, we don't want to do questions this week. Okay, I get it. All right. So this is,
let's do it.
It's one of the quirks of the pod. Okay. All right. So a lot of questions about the athletic story. I'm not sure. I'm guessing everyone who listens to this podcast is aware. The Athletic parachuted in, as national publications are wont to do, and wrote a story declaring the Rutgers move to the Big Ten as the worst of the worst in the looking back at conference expansion. Here's the question. I want to hear your thoughts on that article in the Athletic and where they quoted Politi and trash Rutgers. Is the administration that bad? Let me just give you the background. I was actually interviewed for this story. For 45 minutes, and they didn't quote me. They didn't actually use any of the stuff. I guess I was, and I joked on Twitter. I said maybe I was too positive. So it was my sense on this one is that sometimes, and look, I've done it. We've all done it. They had a headline in mind, and they were going to write a story to that headline that this was the worst move in expansion. I just don't think their reporting supported that conclusion. That was where I came out with it. I mean, if you're going to quote Jim Delaney saying that the revenues from Rutgers and Maryland, the revenues for the Big Ten network after those 2 schools were added increased by 400%. If you're going to quote him in the story about that, how can you make a conclusion that it was a bad decision? All of these moves, they didn't add Rutgers because they're good at football. I mean, they added Rutgers for the money, for the cable boxes. Of course, we knew that then. We know that now. I mean, that hasn't changed. The fact that they're 1-29 against Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State doesn't offset the fact that it made them a lot of money. And I think that's what was lost here. No one in the Big Ten cares that Rutgers Athletic is a money loser in Piscataway, that New Jersey taxpayers or student fees or whatever it might be is keeping this thing afloat. No, they don't care about that. They just care about the fact that adding Rutgers put the Big Ten in a stronger position than before adding Rutgers. And that's the only thing, right? That is the only way you judge that move.
Well, look, I think from the Big Ten standpoint, the only thing that mattered was making money. I understand. From Rutgers' standpoint, it's important to have a conference and not be stuck in the AAC where you're taking trips to Tulsa and Houston and all that stuff. I totally get it. I think from that standpoint, the Big Ten and Rutgers both got what they wanted out of the deal, and it is a net positive. Definitely agree. I think on the football field, the fact that they have struggled so much, it's a negative worth mentioning, right? I think does Ohio State, Michigan State appreciate the essentially free win they got for many years with Rutgers there? Sure, but it's a dead week. It's a second bye week essentially for a lot of these fan bases. And part of football, the fun of college football is competitive games, and not getting competitive games. And even this is the same for Rutgers fans. I think you could celebrate your administrators making more money and the school being able to build facilities, but what does that matter when you're going into a Saturday knowing you're going to get your brains beaten, half the season? That takes away some of the fun. And to me, I think the whole point of this is to have fun, to be able to watch good football and to enjoy your team winning games from time to time. Maybe Rutgers will eventually turn it around in football and become an Iowa-esque program that could pull off these big wins and be competitive. That should be the goal. I just think that while it's nice that your school makes money, at some point, the wins have to come for it to be worth it. And I don't want to hear about Olympic sports success, because that's all well and good. That's nice for the alums that really care about that stuff. But does it really matter that field hockey won a Big Ten title, that women's soccer won a Big Ten title, men's soccer? Like,
Well, it matters to them. I mean, of course.
But the fan base, like how much of the fan base really cares about that stuff?
What about
like,
basketball, though? Does basketball not matter?
Basketball is a fair point. Basketball hasn't won anything really. I mean, they're competitive. They're in there in the league. They win. They go. They've been 500 or better the last 4 years. They're very fun. I will give you that. Basketball has been in the past 4 or 5 years major success for Rutgers, a feather in their cap. That is what I'm saying about football. Football, if they ever become successful like that, then I will see it as a big win for the program. Because to be successful in the Big Ten is a lot better than the AAC, like I said. But till then, I just don't think it's a. It's
a big problem. You're not. Yeah, I totally agree. I hear what you're saying. It's just that I mean, it's just what happened. They had hired the wrong head coach twice, right? And that's not an indictment that Rutgers is always going to be that. And I think already, you're seeing it turn a corner a little bit, right, Pat? I mean, it's not like you can say. And I guess my takeaway from that when you're ripping it as the worst move ever. Well, Nebraska sucked at football for 10 years, and they didn't bring 8 million cable boxes. I mean, like what did Nebraska bring to it? I looked at some of the other moves. Missouri sucks in the SEC, and no one's talking about that being the worst move, right? I don't know, Pat.
I mean, Northwestern has been horrible at pretty much every major sport for as long as the Big Ten has been around. Is anyone going to revoke Northwestern's membership in the Big Ten? Scandal aside, I think it was a little sensational, the article. I agree with you that it didn't live up to the headline. And also a point that we didn't bring up was like everything that they reported on in that story has already been written by us a million times. So it was just like a rehashed version of things that have been said many, many times. And it was just alarming because The Athletic is the New York Times, right? Like it drew some bigger eyeballs.
Right. This is the same. I used to joke once a year. It was like New York newspaper discovers New Jersey football team, but this is what that was.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was.
Another question, and the story did raise talk about honking red flags, but and this question goes to that. A couple questions went to this one. Contraction. Now that college athletics is firmly established the haves and have-nots, how soon do we see the remaining Power 3-4 programs, conferences start looking inward, with the elites looking to further separate from the bottom feeders of these leagues? Basically, how screwed is Rutgers, and how soon will whispers of contraction become open debates? This is from Bob from Long Valley. Listen, last year when we reported the story on the Big Ten anniversary, did the 10-year package, I asked that question to a lot of people. And the best answer I got was from Gene Smith, who says, look, I can't predict. Gene Smith, soon to retire Ohio State athletic director, one of the biggest power brokers in the Big Ten. He says, look, I can't begin to predict anything these days, but I do not see a scenario in which university presidents start voting out, universities in good standing for that reason. He just said, I just don't see that happening. That's not to say it won't. I'm sure he didn't see it that his volleyball team would be playing in Eugene, Oregon someday either. Like, you can't predict these things. I just don't think it's easy to say, all right, yeah, sure, let's start tossing schools out. But that is harder in execution than it is in theory. Right. I mean, then you have to start to do that. You're counting on the fact that there'll be super conferences. You're counting on the fact that the SEC and the Big Ten will get together and make something closer to the NFL. You're counting on just a lot of things happening, I guess, Brian. Am I mistaking my analysis on this?
No. And look, I think that it is more likely than not that Rutgers will never be kicked out of the Big Ten. That being said, I don't think when the TV contract ends in 2030, I believe that's the year, when we get closer and closer to that date, I don't think people should feel 100%, confident. I think there should be some fear that if things don't start turning around in the next 6-7 years, because I don't think, like you said, I don't think it's likely Rutgers gets kicked out now. I didn't think Oregon and Washington would join the conference last year, right? So these things are always evolving, and nothing in college sports would surprise me at this point. I pitched this on Twitter. I saw a genius idea of promotion relegation. I think that would be a genius idea for college football, that we just make it a separate sport, make it a giant one super conference, and then make it like these European soccer leagues where you have, the top division and multiple divisions, and then you kind of instead of teams joining leagues and conferences because of their TV boxes and their audiences, you earn it on the football field. You have to, finish in the top 2 or top 3 of your league. Then you could get promoted, and you don't fall in the bottom 2 and get relegated. I think it'll never happen, but I think that would be an awesome solution.
It's a great idea, but
it always comes back to European soccer.
Right. It's a great idea, but how do you divide the pie, the money pie? I mean, this is all happening because the Pac-10 the schools wanted more money than they were getting from their current conference. I just wonder how that happens, just from a logistical standpoint of getting all those conferences to agree to something.
Hey, Rutgers Rant listeners, it's Steve Politi from NJ Advance Media. We appreciate you supporting this podcast and the sponsors who help us continue doing it. This week's podcast is brought to you by the New Brunswick Development Corporation. If you listen to this show, you love Rutgers. And if you love Rutgers, you know the positive impact that DevCo has made on the campus and its community. We thank the New Brunswick Development Corporation for its continued support and for helping make this podcast possible. Now back to the show.
That's tough.
Steve, I'm curious if when you were doing your reporting for that big story, if you touched on the academic value of the Big Ten and what Rutgers means to that realm of the conference.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I know that was a big deal for a big part of it too.
It was, and it's funny. And I talked to a doctor at the university hospital, a cancer scientist, essentially. It's like, I can't believe I'm wasting this man's time. You should be curing cancer, not talking to me. Curing liver cancer, no less, too. So it's a cancer that might become one that I have to fight someday. Anyway, so and he's just telling me, and as far as the Rutgers goes in the Big Ten, we are the powerhouse. It was like he was bragging about it, we don't look down to nobody here in cancer research, and it was just kind of cool to hear him to say that. But yeah, I mean, it was a good fit, and the Big Ten consortium is like a multi-billion-dollar deal. I mean, this is not like I get it. People make fun of those commercials that come on during halftime is when you go up and get another beer when they're telling you how great the picture of the student athlete in a lab somewhere in Ohio. You make fun of that, but it's a big part of it. And Rutgers, Rutgers place in that is it's real. They're a excellent university that adds to that thing in many different ways. And that's why. And the other part of this, why when you call the athletic story is trying to paint this out to be a bad move for Rutgers, which is just insane. I mean, it's just insane. There's on every level, it was the right move for Rutgers, and especially on non-athletic stuff. Hopefully, instead of being in a conference with, apologies to South Florida and I don't know, SMU, whoever's in the AAC right now, apologies to them. But now you're in a conference. You're with Michigan and you're with Northwestern, and students growing up. This is someone should get this excerpt that could do commercial for Rutgers. But kids growing up now only know Rutgers in the Big Ten. If you're 16-year-old applying to college, you didn't know there was anything else. So anyway, that's my rant about that. I don't think there's any doubt it was important for academically for Rutgers to be in the Big Ten.
And that's why I think Schiano actually he always says, I knew that Rutgers was the right fit for the Big Ten. And he always pairs it with the academics and the athletics or the right fit. And I just totally agree with him in that aspect.
Right. No, there's no question. There's no question.
You know how Notre Dame has I think the hockey plays in America East or something, and football plays AACC. If Rutgers, would there ever be a possibility of academic only in the Big Ten and then athletic department in another conference?
I don't know if that's going to work. I mean, it's still athletic conference first and foremost. Although I did see someone Rick Pitino, not just someone, made the observation that football should break off and they should keep the regional conferences for every other sport. Which, I mean, when you start thinking about, the field hockey team going to Seattle in the middle of the winter, I mean, then you start to say, okay, maybe that does make sense. I don't know if that'll ever happen either. It's just hard logistically to imagine how that works out, and how do you crown a conference champion? I don't know. There's just a lot about that makes it difficult to foresee. But he's right. That does make sense.
Oh, schedule. What's going to happen to the Rutgers 2024 schedule now is a hot topic too. That the Big Ten is going to rework the schedule, and we're just waiting to see what happens, because we know that the schedule Rutgers got for 2024 was a juggernaut, to say the least. Maybe there'll be some revisions in that'll be beneficial.
Is there any scenario where it gets easier by adding Washington or Oregon. Does that make sense?
The joke is they took away Indiana and added UCLA, so this time they'll take away
Maryland.
I don't know, and add Oregon.
Maryland and Washington. Yeah. Yeah, that's to your point, Brian. The point you were making earlier, about they just have to get winning solves everything. They have to get better, and yeah, if they're going to start playing, add two more very, very good football programs that they have to match up with. Yeah, good question. I wonder when did they say when that schedule is coming out? No,
we were asking about it. They just said maybe a couple weeks.
Okay. Something to look forward to. All right, more questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, if Gavin was a 2 last year, a prediction for what number he would be this year. Can we get him to a 5? Would that be, that'd be a big improvement. What do you think?
It's a great question. This is a really well framed question.
It is. Yeah.
I'm optimistic.
You're optimistic. So what does that mean?
I am. I think we can get him to a 5, and Rutgers' identity, we all know what it's going to be. Play great, exactly what the Big Ten analyst said. They're going to play great defense, and they need the offense to be competitive enough to keep the defense off the field, maintain long drives, and just get them into the 20s, 20 points. So I think if you have a quarterback that's a 5 that can move the sticks and, effectively manage that running game, I think that's the recipe for success. And I think that's what everyone's looking forward to.
I would put it at a 4.
Put it at a 4.
I think realistic. I think, which is twice as good as he was last year, but, not all Big Ten level quite yet.
Gotcha. Tony Lawrence wants to know, between the Big Ten roadshow and the post-scrimmage pressure, how nervous should we be about the offense? I mean, you watched it last year. I don't think there's anything that would have happened at camp that wouldn't make you wouldn't be nervous going into the first game, right? I mean, they got shut out by Maryland. The guys could barely move the ball. So of course it's going to be nerves. How nervous should people be?
I mean, it can't get much worse, right? So
That's
I
true.
guess they could be relaxed that the worst is come and gone. It can only get better.
Right. All right. Fair enough. All right. We have some hoop schedule questions. Any news on the second, third B-ball games? Brian, what do we got on the schedule? Is that the schedule's out and official? Is anything else happening?
I think they mean the second and third games of the overseas trip, right?
I guess so. Yes.
I don't know. It'll happen this week. They'll both happen this week. I just don't know what days. The schedule is done. They're going to officially announce it at some point when they get back, and the Big Ten will announce its schedule, because you have the pairings. They haven't announced the schedule yet. That should be late August, early September. That's when it usually is.
And we like the basketball schedule better than last year a little bit. Is that?
I would say so. I think this is probably the best schedule they've had under Pikel, which isn't,
right.
It's a very low bar to clear, but I would say so. I think it's not a huge improvement from years past, but I would say a very strong step in the right direction.
Okay. That's good. And the Mississippi State game at the Rock is still happening. Is that the?
Correct. That was officially announced. And I think I said this on the pod, but I'll say it again. Just ingenious scheduling to get a neutral site game against a team from Mississippi, 40 minutes away from your home arena, that you can pack out with 80% Rutgers fans.
80%. Who's coming up from Mississippi for that game?
The 20% are going to be empty seats for people traveling for Christmas. Gotcha. I just, if that place isn't, to your point, yes, if that place isn't packed with Rutgers fans and there's the 5 Mississippi State fans are fighting for their life, then it would be a failure.
All right. Dylan Harper question. You knew this was coming. When must a Dylan Harper make a decision? Is there an actual rule or just a rule of thumb? I don't think he has to make a decision until October 2024, September 2024. If he could just show up, he could just enroll. That's not going to happen, obviously. Look, like a lot of people in media, I had just a ton of people last week nudging me that this is going to happen soon. This is going to happen soon. I've seen no indication that that's true yet. But there was a lot of smoke late last week that people thought that this thing was coming down the pike in a hurry. Brian, what are you hearing now? I mean, is it's obviously a waiting game, but any indication whatsoever that he's closer?
It should happen soon. It was, some people said last week, some people think this week, some people think early September. It sounds like it's going to happen before his high school season starts in October, I think. But that is a very large range.
Yeah.
I would really appreciate it if Dylan just announced the day himself at some point soon to let everybody, let us know, let the fans stop asking us about it. He was on I think he's playing into it a little bit too, because he was on Instagram Live a week ago with Ron and they were joking around and he's saying like commitment coming soon, maybe this Friday. And then 5 minutes later, he's saying, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So you think maybe it's Friday, maybe he's kidding about kidding. And now my mind is in a complete pretzel about the whims of a 16-year-old kid. And I'm stressing out all weekend. So I think if gun to my head, I would soon-ish, next week or two, at latest in the next month. But if he extended this to October, I wouldn't be surprised either, because he was supposed to commit in July. So your guess is as good as mine.
The big news in basketball circles, Cooper Flagg reclassifying to the class of 2024, which means Rutgers will no longer be getting the number one prospect. I guess people think Cooper Flagg is pretty much like, what's the comparison you've heard? He is by far the number one player.
Yeah.
If Rutgers gets Dylan Harper, do they still have the number one class?
Yes. They would still have the number one class, barring North Carolina landing Cooper Flagg, which is not going to happen. He's going to Duke. I don't think Duke's class is going to be quite strong enough to surpass Rutgers.
Is Cooper Flagg going to Duke change Dylan Harper's mind?
I don't think so. I mean, they spent a lot of time together at recent Nike camp, and they're friendly, but I don't think so. I think Dylan Harper at Rutgers would be the guy. I think if you're going to any team with Cooper Flagg, you are most certainly not the guy.
Looking at a picture of Cooper Flagg, he has got Duke written all over him, doesn't he? Just looks like a Duke. He just looks like he's a cross between Christian Leitner and what was the guy? There you go. That's you. Yes, exactly. Yes, that's it. That's great. Yeah, he's a Dookie. All right, couple more questions. This is one I don't know I have no idea someone could just be making this up, but a soccer question that I'm wondering if you have the answer to. How are teams chosen to be in exhibitions for soccer? BYU is far. Are they paid? I get Colgate, but why not closer schools? I guess the soccer team's playing BYU. Is that right?
They hosted BYU. The women's soccer team hosted BYU in a scrimmage last week.
Gotcha.
I have no idea. I have no idea if they're paid. I have no idea. I truthfully couldn't even tell you if BYU is a good program.
Mormon mission maybe coming out here or something.
There's a lot to fix in New Jersey, so maybe, but I would doubt it.
All right, so we don't have an answer to that one. Sorry. And the final one: would any of you beat reporters dare climb to the top of the tower on the Rutgers football practice field? This is from CJ and Basking Ridge. I would say that now, I mean, the towers are relatively sturdy structures now. In the old days, I would not be caught dead on those back in the Shiano 1.0. I mean, those things were death traps. But I think now I would climb up there.
Well,
Would you?
I wouldn't be worried about the structural integrity of the tower. I'd be worried about the sniper standing over the hail center knocking me down when I try to climb up the stairs.
I was going to say, I'm not going to be allowed back into practice after what I said on this podcast today. So that won't be a possibility.
That's great. All right. So those are all the questions we've got. So yes, I'm going up to the tower. The other two are chicken shit. All right. Final thoughts, guys. How do you want to close this sucker? Anything else? No?
Men's soccer starts their season. Women's soccer and men's soccer start their season this week, I believe, or next week. So the Rutgers athletics calendar is starting soon.
Do we expect good soccer teams? Obviously, the men are coming off a very good season, a breakthrough season. The women might have taken a step back, but they are, as we've said, the premier Olympic sport team. So what do we think?
I would say there will be good soccer play at URSAC this year. I cannot promise titles, but I think that the women's soccer will compete for the Big Ten title, and I think men's soccer will be competitive in the Big Ten. So I would say so.
Good. All right. Lanny, final thoughts?
I would just add that I've been a big believer in Kirk Shiraka, and I think that he is the right guy for the job and is gonna do good things for this offense, and that the reaction coming off the scrimmage has just been a little bit over the top for what's been coming. Like I think there needs to be a little bit more patience, and I think that just have some faith that the offense is going to be a little bit better, and be able to keep the team in games. That's the bottom line. Like, can the offense be good enough to keep them in games? And I think that they will.
You're asking for optimism from a fan base that's convinced they're going to be relegated out of the Big Ten. I like it. That's good.
Yes.
That's good. That's good.
I think this is a good time to point out that Rutgers fans are making estimations on what's going on based on the face and tone of their head coach in a press conference.
No one actually saw it.
No one actually saw anything. No one has. There's not been much information out, which maybe if there was a little bit more to bite, people wouldn't be the third wrinkle on Greg Schiano's forehead wouldn't be sending people into epileptic, shock all weekend. Just saying.
The third wrinkle. Love it. All right, fellas. Thanks again. Thanks again for our listeners. Thank you. Thank you to Devco, Chris Palladino. We love you guys up for another year of this fun. And we'll be back, I guess, next week to talk some Rutgers football and basketball. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.
You haven't heard enough from me yet, huh? Steve Politi here for one last thank you to this episode's sponsor, New Brunswick Development Corporation, and to listeners like you who make it all the way to the end of the show. We'll see you again soon.